now, let's return to the issue of how well or not Stormont is working. One man who must be rubbing his hands at all the focus on reform is Alan Whysall from the Constitution Unit at University College London. He's just produced a report on how government here could be improved, and I'm pleased to say he's with me now. Welcome to you. So, reform is very much the subject of the moment, and we've just heard from Naomi Long in terms of the Alliance Party's ideas for how that might be best delivered, even though the DUP is not at all keen. What do you make of what you heard broadly from Naomi Long tonight, first of all?
I think it's right that we do need to focus on reform and focus on the detailed reform, because at times in the past we've had sort of tokenistic reforms that haven't actually achieved a lot. Our report this time is about delivery specifically, and how to get government to deliver better. And the record so far has not been good, and you do increasingly wonder how the institutions can go on if they can't deliver good government better than this. There is so much that appears to be blocked, and that, you know, that is dangerous. Institutions that don't deliver are less stable. If they're delivering and people are happy with them, then it's going to be harder to pull them over. So it's particularly important that they do develop those changes of attitude, those changes of practice that are necessary to deliver better. And part of this is a matter of political culture, and it's very difficult. You know, we have a political culture that's sort of rooted in the big constitutional issues and all of that, and not on good government. Much of the Western world is not an exemplar at the moment. But there are also institutional difficulties. The Good Friday Agreement institutions, basically, and we're stuck with the basic architecture. We can't really depart from that at the moment. But the way it works at the moment does make it very difficult.
But is it your view that reform and better delivery are inextricably linked? I mean, can we not have one without the other?
Yes, I think it is true. As I say, it's not just a matter of institutional tinkering. I think it does need cultural change. It does need a commitment to the parties, from the parties, to do government better, and ultimately to take some of these famous difficult decisions, painful choices, and all of that. And the financial crises that may be looming may bring that home particularly. Institutional reforms, though, in that context could also help to put in a position to do government delivery a bit more professionally.
Gavin Robinson seems to take the view that it's not about changing the structures, it's about better ministerial performance. So having a whole conversation about changing those structures is unnecessary if people step up to the plate and do what they need to be doing and actually work together. That's effectively what he said today.
Yeah, absolutely. The structures make it quite difficult to work together, though, in some ways. You know, we have a government that is brought together of political polar opposites. They're brought together by an algorithm, by the D'Hondt algorithm, with no necessary common thinking in place in advance. So we've got to find ways of working around that to ensure that really government does grasp the difficult issues and does work together. And there have been times in the history of these structures, you know, when it has worked much more effectively than now. You look back to the beginning of the Robinson-McGuinness era. They at least didn't disagree in public, and they did a number of effective things together. So, you know, we can do better.
Can I just ask you very quickly about your own report, which you've published in the last day or two? You highlight two key issues: Northern Ireland's particular political culture and its tendency to focus on constitutional issues, and then the unique structure of its power-sharing institutions built around the notion of a mandatory coalition, which we know all about. Where do we start if we're going to address big issues like that?
I mean, I think we have to have a discussion about doing government better, because there has got to be a political commitment to do that.
So that's a bigger conversation than simply reforming the institutions.
Yes, I think reforms are very probably must be a part of it.
Right.
But they won't work without that degree of political commitment.
So reform in itself won't deliver the kind of change that you think is necessary?
No, because we're liable to get tokenistic reforms that people, you know, we have provision for a programme for government, which is supposed to guide all the big things that the executive does.
Well, we have a programme for government.
We do have a programme,
but we don't have a budget. But we don't have a multi-year budget. No. Never mind a one-year budget.
No, and you can question how far the programme for government is actually very effective at guiding everything that the executive does. You know, it took them a year to to arrive at it after all. A government that was determined to improve economic and social conditions would be trying to do things differently. And I do suggest that London has a responsibility really to raise consciousness at least about this. It can't make unilateral changes, but it can and ought to be ventilating the issues more.
Well, that's a very interesting point that you raise. What is the role of the two governments in all of this? Because we've got the UK government and, of course, we've got input from the Irish government, and there's a debate about how much those two governments are prepared to engage in the whole reform conversation. But again, how much are they prepared to engage in the bigger conversation that you say they need to engage in?
Well, I think they need to, and the Secretary of State has occasionally done this, and has particularly in the context of finances. It's very difficult. I mean, governments have, on the whole, wanted to praise the executive and encourage them, and say, "Well done." And it's and the fact that it is there is a great advantage over it not being there. And people will say, who are London executive lecturing us on good government, looking at some of the things that have been done in recent years. Nevertheless, it is important, I think, that these issues are ventilated more.
Naomi Long said on the programme tonight she couldn't be sure that there will be devolution in place in a year's time, and this day next year is going to be elections to the Assembly and to the councils. I mean, so there's a possibility of collapse. Certainly people are talking about it. Commentators are talking about it more and more, it seems. If there is another collapse, do you think that could mark the end of the devolution project for the foreseeable future?
There is a very real risk. I mean, people have said before, we'll never get, if devolution collapses, we'll never get it back again. And it has come back. Nevertheless, the public will grow more and more disillusioned with it. People will start thinking of constitutional change. People are already starting to think of constitutional change of a bigger sort as the way forward. I do caution in the report, whatever you think about Irish unity, take no position at all on that. There are no real grounds for saying that of itself will improve government here. We have a set of particular problems. We may have a Stormont in the context of a United Ireland, for United Ireland if it comes about. We really need to tackle these problems now.
Okay, very interesting to hear from you. Alan, thanks very much indeed for coming in to join us.